Welcome to Inside the Audiverse. My name is Thomas Henley, and today we're going to be commentating on a video made by Autistic AF on Joe Rogan. Apparently, Joe Rogan thinks that autistic people lack empathy. Very big myth that's been going around for a while, and I mean, there's no shortage of very strange takes coming from the Joe Rogan experience. I think I saw one recently about someone who was inventing a new type of maths, and it was talked about in a very serious context, and it made me chuckle quite a bit. Let us get into the video. I'm sure there will be a lot to dive into. Yes, you get the behind the scenes, Thomas. God damn it.
Think about Oppenheimer's struggle that he had with this thing that he had created that was ultimately going to lead to destruction of hundreds of thousands of lives, if not the entire human race itself.
Right. Yeah.
Which was very deeply based in philosophy, like his perspective and his struggles with it. I mean, if he was just like an automaton, like some, you know, sociopathic, just super Alzheimer's guy, or, you know, that didn't, not autism guy, rather, that didn't think at all about no concept at all.
Oh, yes. Yes, because, of course, autistic people are famous for not thinking about stuff very deeply, of course. Okay, so it's taking the whole Oppenheimer thing. I've seen that movie. It gave me chills. It was very emotional. I very much enjoyed it. It was very depressing, but quite a maybe good insight. I don't know how factually correct the whole thing was, but from what I saw of the movie, the character of Oppenheimer, he didn't seem to show many autistic traits from what I could see. He just seemed to be a very sort of introspective, introverted individual who had a mission. I'm not too sure about that. Autism guy? This is going to be interesting.
Concept at all about empathy, no concept at all about our perspective in the he would just
no concept
plow forth
about
ahead and just launch bombs. Like, that's
he would just plow forth ahead and just launch bombs. Like, that's
Yep.
Hey friends, I'm Mike, a late diagnosed autistic adult, and today we're going that autistic people somehow lack empathy.
What is that clip? I don't understand what logical thought could get them to that perspective. Maybe he just has such a stigmatized view of autism that that's what he thinks autism is, that we just don't think about the consequences of our actions, and that we don't care about the rest of the human race. What is that the point that he's trying to make? Craziness. Go on, Mike, sorry for interrupting.
A persistent stereotype is that of autistic individuals being cold or unfeeling. However, many autistic people are simply expressing empathy differently. Some might not display the typical facial expressions or body language that neurotypical people are expecting. But this doesn't mean that they aren't feeling empathy.
No, for sure.
Additionally, sensory sensitivities and social anxieties may lead to behaviours that are mistakenly interpreted as a lack of empathy at all. After all,
there was a research study done by a autism researcher, of course, in Cambridge, Simon Baron-Cohen. Yes, there's a lot of thoughts about Simon Baron-Cohen, but looking at his research, he compared sort of traits, this particular trait of empathy between autistic people and psychopathic individuals, which generally show little to no empathy, psychopathic individuals. He compared these two concepts of cognitive and adaptive empathy. Cognitive being you're able to see how someone is feeling and just be like, okay, that's their feeling and emotion without them sort of explaining it to you directly. And the other one's the adaptive empathy, which is what we think of as traditional empathy, which is you feel the feelings, you empathize, you put yourself in their shoes, you try to make them feel better, or at least you feel sad that they're in a certain emotion. And that's generally how you sort of split them into two. And, autistic people tend to struggle, particularly with neurotypical expression. Like, we tend to be a lot more sort of direct in explaining our emotions rather than expressing them. Not everybody, of course, is very, very different, but when it comes to sort of the neurotypical landscape and behaviors, that can be something that we can struggle with and also develop ourselves if we want to. With psychopaths, they have very high cognitive empathy, meaning that they know how people are feeling, they can read it, they can read people, but they generally don't have a lot of adaptive empathy. And it's the opposite. It's the inverse thing for autistic people in general. Not everybody, of course. I would probably be an example of a person who does have good cognitive empathy because it's something that I've been interested in for a while. So I'm sure that there's a lot of people who do. Just putting that out there. And then also, I think what Mike was talking about is the sort of the social related things around it, because generally there's a way that people sort of comfort and empathize with other people that's seen as like the normative way of doing it, which is like, oh, you make a lot of deep eye contact, you make some concerning faces, perhaps you pat them on the shoulder, you do all of that stuff, which typically isn't something that I enjoy. When somebody is empathizing with me, it doesn't make me feel better. And so naturally, when I was growing up, I didn't do that stuff because, we sort of, we model what we think people will want based on what we want when we're very, very young, sort of see the world from our own perspective and such. So it's a very, very complex thing. I'm interested to see what Mike has to say about this. I'm also interested to see what else Joe Rogan is going to say. I'm wanting some type of explanation for that clip, that is for sure.
A lack of empathy amongst autistic people would be alarming if it were true. There'd also be a strong evidential support for it, which there isn't. So, in this episode of the Joe Rogan podcast, Joe Rogan is talking with a philosopher, and it's actually a rather good episode, other than this little trope near the start that even the guest didn't challenge him on. That's pretty disappointing to me, since these tired ideas hurt autistic people by spreading prejudice about them. It's a rehash of the fictional characters that are both scientifically brilliant on one side and yet have this horrible downside, like not being able to understand the emotions of others. Don't tell me you haven't heard of this before.
Like me, Raj is demonstrating empathy.
What is empathy to you? Just so that we're on the same page, let's define our terms. First up, we have cognitive empathy. For instance, this is your ability to know and understand what someone else is feeling. You might not feel it yourself, but you have a conceptual understanding of it. You know what someone else is going through. A friend of mine once told me about a really stressful day they had at work, and I listened, but I didn't immediately feel their stress too. I understood the weight of what they were telling me, but I usually go into this like troubleshooting mode when friends tell me about things that have upset them. And on occasion, it's had me compared unfavourably to characters like Taos. It's as though the other...
I think it's worth pointing out as well that like a lot of people go into that troubleshooting mode as well. I think generally people are looking for different things when they confide in someone. Like some people just kind of deal with their emotions and bottle their emotions up and then only approach people for like practical advice on dealing with a situation. Whereas other people, I'd say probably the majority of people, when they tell you about their problems, especially if you're like a friend or a partner or a parent or something, they want you to some degree just listen to them. It's sort of like they're offloading something. You don't really need to give much sort of feedback on it other than letting them express themselves. It's actually like something that a lot of psychologists do, just let people talk. When you externalize your thoughts, sometimes it makes it a little bit easier to sort of process, but also think about ways to kind of go over that situation. It's actually probably one of the big things that like couples can have difficulties with, if one person's wanting to get that sort of emotional reassurance, support in that sense, and the other person's like, oh, okay, well, this is how you can deal with it. And they're not looking for a solution in this case. It's just like they just want to be in a space where they feel like they're being empathized with, But it's very different person to person. I'd say that for a lot of autistic people, generally, like you go either one of two ways. You're either like an emotional sponge, you just absorb it all, and it's your thing, and you get like very focused on trying to help them in that situation. You feel the emotions and all of that. I know people who are like that. I also know people who, I'd say probably people like my dad, who I'd say stuff to. Like you say, oh, I've been having like a really hard day. I can't seem to focus with work and stuff like that. And then they'll say something along the lines of, okay, you need to do this, this, and this, and then you'll solve it. I'm like, I know. I know. I'm just looking for like, oh, that sounds hard. Do you want to go to the gym and sort of hash out the emotions. Maybe you feel a bit better about it later. You know, that's the ideal in that situation for me. I'm not always looking for like answers, I guess. It's a difficult one, isn't it? Yeah, I'm not going to ramble too much more.
The other person is expecting to see a stereotyped emotional display from me rather than have me genuinely try to listen to their
stereotyped emotional display.
You do have a nail in your head.
Oh, I love this video.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure?
Next up is affective empathy, and this is where you feel emotionally what other people are feeling. For instance, if a friend is in pain or distress, you feel those emotions yourself. Affective empathy can sometimes be overwhelming for us, especially for people who are more emotionally sensitive, say. For me, affective empathy can sometimes feel like I'm absorbing other people's emotions without consent.
Sponging.
If someone close to me is upset, I find it hard to separate their feelings from my own, and I might end up just being utterly emotionally drained. One time a friend was going through a breakup, and even though it didn't involve me, I felt their sadness so strongly that it almost became my own. I had to step back to process the emotional weight I'd just suddenly found myself absorbing. Now, some people I know are going to do this to me. I find after meeting with them that they leave happier and lighter. I feel tired and wanting to crawl into a small space to recharge. It's as though on some level they've been an emotional vampire. Many autistic people find themselves in this hyper-empathy arena, and this can mean a form of hyper-affective empathy. Maybe that autistic person you think is being cold and distant is actually simply on self-preservation mode. Lastly, we have compassionate empathy. This is when I notice that someone's going through something difficult and I not only feel for them, but I want to help. So when a friend's being stressed out about work, I'll try and do more than just listen or offer advice. I'll check in on them, send them something to brighten up their day maybe, or offer practical help if I can. It's not just about recognizing their struggle, it's about wanting to do something to ease it. I used to volunteer for cats protection and animal rescue organisations. This is a form of compassionate empathy. My issue was that I was spending more time volunteering for others than I was on myself. Now, I'm aware of this now, and I'm quite protective of my own time, as I gave up so much of myself that I eventually ended up completely dysfunctional. More on this story for my Patreon tigers.
There is an interesting sort of concept. I read a book called The Selfish Gene. It's a very popular book. I'm sure a lot of people have read up about it. I like the concept of understanding like why people do things and such. And I think there's one thing that I read about sort of why humans do nice things for other people. You know, there is actually like endorphins that are released when you do something that is kind for another person. And a lot of the time that can really help your own mental state as well. I think it's something which, like, obviously, like, if you read into it and you understand, like, the biological mechanisms behind it, I mean, it seems very horrible and, like, oh, you're being selfish and stuff. But, I mean, it's interesting to think that, you know, you do things selflessly for other people, but you also get, like, a little bit of a brain boost. You get some fuzzy feelings. You feel better for helping people. I'm definitely not saying this in your case, Mike. I mean, everyone does it. You know how? My God, look, you go into the rabbit holes of why we do things we do, and it just kind of erases the meaning of things. But yeah, I don't know what my point was with that, but it is an interesting thing. I don't agree with Darkin's. Do you mean Darwin's take on the selfish gene? I believe it's more nuanced. No, of course. I'm not saying that everything is like, you know, I mean, I agree with everything, you know, but I do think that there are like little, I mean, in that case, understanding that it can actually improve your own mood state to do things good for other people. You know, it's definitely worked for me. That always fills me with a good feeling, you know, helps me sort of deal with my own problems in my own life if I am helping other people. But you can also go a bit too far with it. You know, if it starts getting in the way of your routine and, you know, your energy levels start draining, like I think what Mike's talking about. So there is a fine balance, but generally doing nice things for people it's kind of a win-win situation. You get a little bit of brain chemicals, maybe a positive sort of spin on your day. You get whatever you gave them. The guaranteed way I will not be thinking of my own stuff in my head is thinking of other people, do something for them. No, of course, 100%. Your self-esteem. What do you mean? Why not provide comfort for a friend? No, I'm not saying don't provide comfort for a friend. You know, I think it's important. There's nothing better than the joy that you get from helping somebody in my books.
When you see me going into this troubleshooting mode, that's cognitive empathy kicking in. And it's also my way of trying to help, even if it doesn't match up with what someone else is expecting to see emotionally. So far, so uncontroversial, right?
Well, I think to a certain degree, like, it's adaptive empathy as well, because like you perceive that someone is in an emotional state. Like the adaptive empathy is something that you feel internally. You know, you feel internally like you want to help, and your way of helping is troubleshooting. So you are showing adaptive empathy. It's just not the way that they want to be helped in that situation, I guess, if that makes sense.
Autistic people often communicate and express emotions differently than neurotypical people. If you're like me, and remember, if you've met one autistic person, then you've met just one autistic person, then I might not make eye contact or smile or frown or do whatever it is with my body in the way that neurotypical people might expect to accompany certain emotions. Displaying empathy, like as an act, is an additional effort. It's kind of like masking, if you will, but experiencing and sharing the emotion underlying it, the actual empathy, is not. When my neurobiology was created, as though in a giant video game.
Fallout reference, love it. Amazing. What would be your guys' stats on this? Because you've got a certain amount of stat points, can't you? So you can't just max out all of these. I think I'd probably give myself a 7 or an 8. Intelligence, probably agility, I'd put it at about a 4. Charisma, 7. Endurance, probably not very good nowadays. I give it a 4. Perception, I'd say that's probably maxed out. Strength, I give myself an 8. What are your guys' stats? Oh, I love Fallout. I love any game that you can like customize the attributes of a character. It just fills my. It makes me feel great inside, you know. I always try to mimic what I would think that I am like in these games. Max strength? No, definitely not max strength. I give myself an 8. Yeah, I think one thing that I want to say on the actual like point that Mike was making, I think generally the way that I empathize with people is I will sit down and I will basically look off into a corner and sort of have a very blank expression on my face. Like a lot of the time, I do have a lot of expressions, but when I am generally trying to empathize and think about what that person might be feeling, trying to understand it, I shut off everything else in my brain. So my focus is 100% on the words that are coming out of their mouth, not on their face, not on anything like that. I'm not doing that. Like that's the way that I can best empathize with people. And then I can sort of formulate a response and I can comfort them. And once I understand, you know, but I have to understand where they're coming from first. And that's the way that I do it. Whereas most people, they would sit down, as I've said, and sort of look that person in the eyes and, you know, nodding and sort of affirming what they're saying and, you know, asking them, I would ask them little questions, but asking them little questions, maybe a bit of comforting physical contact. That's not the natural way that I go about doing it, but I understand that that's usually what people want from that situation, or else some people may make accusations that you aren't listening to them or you're not bothered, or, you know, so it's a complex one. It's that whole cross-cognitive barrier, isn't it, between autistic people and non-holistic people. It's a bit of a complex one. 10 across all boards. Max empathy, yeah. Where is the empathy stat here? I suppose that's your own decisions in the game. I haven't a clue how to answer that. I need to spend more time analysing some sort of data that I don't have. No. I use it to find yourself. In time, you'll know your actual strengths and weaknesses and you'll be able to handle them a bit better. Be you, it's the best you will ever be. Nice. Very profound again, Eric. I got a mod that changes the Savant perk in Fallout 4 to Randy Savage. I need to play it. I need to play Fallout again. Actually, no, to be honest, the next game that I want to replay for the story would probably be BioShock. I love that game.
Character creation sheet. One of the perks chosen for me, sort of accidentally, was delayed emotional processing. Sometimes it's a literal superpower. I've been involved in life-saving situations where I just follow my training as though I'm a programmed android. And sometimes, outside of those times, I break down uncontrollably. Usually it's a one.
That is something which is related to autistic alexithymia. It's one of the small benefits of being an alexithymic individual. We can sometimes be very, very good in emergency situations. Ooh, sorry for the boop. Because we have a delayed processing of that emotion, you know, and so I actually meet quite a few people who are autistic who work in fields which do have, like, the whole job is designed around emergencies, things related to like healthcare or survive, like helping people survive. What would you say? Paramedics, things of that nature. Some people, it just really works for some people, but then again, sometimes maybe on the night, on the evening, it can sort of get to them quite a bit. So it's just kind of, it's a very strange way that it happens. It happens to you too, yeah. I have alexithymia, I can confirm. 100%.
It's a while after the event when there's nothing apparent to cause me any upset at the time.
Yeah.
Last week, Thomas Henley and I were at the gym.
Hey,
we left
there's
at 9:33 p.m. Unfortunately, I'd driven us there, and the security shutter gates to the car park closed at 9:30 p.m. I had an overnight ferry to catch in a few hours. The general expectation at such times is to flap emotionally. Yeah, let's just say. We can't be having any of those actual hand flaps. I'm joking, of course. Stims help us to emotionally regulate, but I didn't need any emotional regulation to troubleshoot getting out. There was
just heaps of dissociation. See, that's what happens to me. I dissociate and then I go into robot mode. That's what happens. It's either that or I just have an instant panic attack. There's no in between. Oh my god. Yeah, I mean that was a bit of an unfortunate circumstance. We came out of the gym at about 9 p.m. I think, and that 9:03, and the car park closed at 9. And thankfully there was a dude there, and we had to call the council. Well, we called the council because we didn't think we'd be able to get in. Oh my god. It all worked out though. We didn't need to panic, you know. That was all good. But when it comes to like the actual delayed processing as well, I do think that there is an aspect of understanding speech like in real time. So like if someone's emotionally confiding in you, generally most people expect a response, an emotional response from you within a regular sort of time frame. So if somebody is like, you know, they say something to you, generally people will react in a certain time after they said it. But for me, because I do actually have speech processing differences, when someone tells me something, it's almost like I have to think about it for an extra few seconds. And within that time, they've already seen my blank expression to what they've said. And so me responding is, you know, some people it doesn't matter. Like they're not bothered by it, but some people just kind of get a bit like, what is happening here? You know, why are you taking so long? But just like a couple of seconds, 3 seconds, you know, of an extra thinking time. Jeez, I wish I lived in the UK so I can hang out with you guys. That would be nice. I need to do some, maybe when my channel gets a bit bigger, I'll host some kind of autism meetup. I've seen a few people do that kind of thing.
There was a hotel next door to the car park, so I called them and the receptionist told me it wasn't their problem and hung up on me. I called the local council office, but as expected at night time, no answer. A kind passerby who was staying at the hotel offered to try their keycard on the door, and it worked. Once in, I pressed the big green emergency exit button, and we were out. Does anyone else somehow go into an automatic disassociation, as though that feeling of piloting a meat suit suddenly comes into a strong clarity and you just get through whatever challenge is ahead of you?
It's almost spiritual, you know? I think that the roots of my interest in philosophy and psychology and like just sort of base lay-level physics is due to my experiences with dissociation. I just it gives you some weird perspective on life. You know, you have the depersonalization, makes you feel like you're not real. You know, a lot of questions come from that. You just feel like it's kind of autopiloted, you know, flesh suit, as Autistic AF said. And then the derealization, you feel like everything's sort of a dreamscape and everything that you do is inconsequential. And you know, after a while, being in that state, if it's long term, it can really make you question a lot of things about reality and yourself and all of that stuff. It's a very powerful thing, and dissociation is your body's tool is one of the tools that it can use to deal with stressful situations. If your life's stressful, it might be a long-term thing, like it was for me. I think probably for maybe just 8 years straight when I was a teen. That was my life. When you come out of the dissociation, that's a whole different thing. You know, it's kind of nice because you feel like you're living in the world and you are yourself. But it's also stressful because you're living in the world and you're yourself and you have responsibilities. Hello, Henley. Good to see you. I appreciate your comments recently on the videos. I have read them, although I'm not always the best with replying, but I appreciate them. Hello, Stephanie. Hello. You finally cancelled your gym. Why, Layla? Yeah, dissociation can have positives and negatives, 100%. I'm grateful not to be heavily dissociated all the time, though. I would say that.
It's like a monotropic focus state, but it's emotional. And at some point, not in my control, all the emotions that might be typically expected to work themselves out all emerge everywhere all at once. Saber. He interrupts every single video, by the way, every single time. Hopefully I'm on my own, somewhere quiet when this happens. People often expect an immediate emotional response, but for me, and for many others like me, it's more of a delayed download. You'll get it eventually, but it takes time to process. Do you know what I mean? Let me know in the comments below. It's not just me, right? Knowing that I have different, but not lesser emotional processes, and that I now have a label for this, allows me to plan for emotional downtime and to be kinder to myself when it inevitably happens. I am autistic, and I wish I knew this 2 decades ago. For decades,
it's also not always a good thing. Like, dissociation is not always a good thing. Like, I think one of the difficulties that I've had, particularly when it comes to dating, is that generally, like, the way that you meet people is like either go for coffee or you go for drinks, you know. And I've been for drinks before, like just drinks before, and it's been all good. Sometimes, you know, I'm just on that particular day, I feel a bit hyped, you know, want to go out onto the scene. And one of the problems with dissociation, particularly when it comes to the old alky, well, the alky increases your dissociation. And if you're already dissociated, it can sometimes be very, very difficult to be in tune with your emotions even more. And so I've had like meltdowns when I've been in situations like that. It's not fun, and I'm taking precautions to not have that happen. I can keep myself safe in those situations, but it's not the best. And it just comes out of nowhere, you know. Started dissociating in public, and even my husband. So it's not good. Been a long drawn out period of feeling down after. Yeah. There are many times I don't realize I've been dissociating. It happens very automatically and subconsciously. Yeah. Oh my God, I dissociated for a bit. Watching this live, Thomas mentions Henley, which is how my name is pronounced, and this brought me back from dissociation. We got another Henley in here. Henley, hello. West is on the train. Dating another autistic seems like it would be much more harmonious. I mean, you say that. I mean, I understand, like, it's pretty much like the gold standard in a lot of autism spaces to date another autistic person, but I would say probably, like, they might get it a bit more, and they probably just won't want to do those activities as much as most people. Well, some people do, but I don't think so. I think it's more based on who that person is, genuinely. Autistic people can be very, very different from each other in all the ways outside of autism, which is a lot, you know. Same, had to stop drinking, yeah, for sure. And that's a problem because I can usually handle a lot, but you know, it's a problem when you don't know that you're getting stressed until it's too much, just in general. And then you add on the dissociative elements, it can be hard.
Autism was primarily viewed through the medical lens as a disorder, often described in terms of deficits in social and emotional skills, for instance. This deficit model emphasizes what autistic people may struggle with, for instance, emotional dysregulation, rather than on the diverse ways that they can experience and express emotion. Or what about being clear-headed in an emergency? Surely that's got to be worth some non-deficit points without being typecast in some, data from Star Trek or Dr. House type of thing. I mean, they might have some autistic features and they're entertaining, but that's as far as it goes. One of the most important ideas to emerge in recent years is the double empathy problem, coined by Dr. Damien Milton in 2012.
Recently?
This theory suggests...
2012? That's like 12 years ago. I suppose it depends where you're conceptualizing this recently. I do that a lot as well. It's 2012, 12 years ago. What? Craziness. God damn it. Thanks, Laska. Much appreciate you being here.
Suggests that the social communication difficulties between autistic and non-autistic individuals, they go both ways. There's takes two to tango.
Yep.
It's not just that autistic people struggle to understand neurotypical perspectives, therefore our deficits, but that neurotypical people often struggle to understand autistic ways of thinking and feeling. Both ways.
Yes, both ways. But most people are just aware of autistic people not being able to understand neurotypicals because they're majority and they do the research, you know. And because of what Mike said about the deficit model, 100%. It's a bit of a difficult one. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Cassandra syndrome. Cassandra syndrome. Give it a look up. There's a lot of communities of neurotypical holistic partners of autistic people who kind of go into these crazy little groups and basically like the hate that you see towards holistic people in the autistic community sometimes, it's kind of like that, but the opposite way around. It's just everybody just complaining about how horrible dating an autistic person is. And they came up in the dating spaces, they came up with this concept called Cassandra syndrome, which basically means sort of everyone else thinks that your partner is great, and in reality they're not. That's the basic way of describing it. I'm not going to go too much into it, but that came up. Obviously, I think double empathy is a good way of, you know, balancing it reasonably, you know, taking into account differences, going two ways, not just one way. My lord. Never heard of it. Yeah, the private groups. I think one of my partners in the past, I have asked them to do a bit of sleuthing for me. It's very interesting.
Both ways. I remember this one time I was hanging out with a group of friends at a dinner party. Everyone was chatting and catching up, but I was really focused on a project that I'd been working on earlier that day, something that had totally absorbed all of my attention earlier. I wasn't being rude, but I wasn't chiming in with the usual casual small talk, you know, like the stuff that people expect. I was listening, just not interacting the way that everyone else was. After a while, one of my friends called me out in front of the group saying, "Hey Mike, you've been really, really quiet tonight. Are you mad at someone?" Thing is, I wasn't mad at all, but I could see that they were interpreting my quietness as me being upset or not enjoying myself. It felt really awkward at that moment, I think, because in my mind, I was just being myself, thinking deeply, paying attention in my own way, but I wasn't doing it in the whole neurotypical give and take banter of conversation. So in that moment, my friend assumed something was wrong. I tried to explain that I was just focused on something else, but they didn't quite get it. They thought I was avoiding someone in the group, when in reality, I was just enjoying being there in my own way. The funny thing is, if this had happened in a room full of autistic people, no one would have batted an eyelid. No one would give a shit. Everyone would be generally understanding that sometimes you just need space to think or focus. And it doesn't mean that you're disconnected or upset. But my friend was neurotypical. Their expectation of normal societal behavior.
I think, like, in that situation, I'd probably say, like, you're good. You know, if someone's usually chatting quite a bit and then they're not, I'll usually ask them if they're all right. But I would never, like, think that they were angry or, you know. Well, I mean, if they're making an angry face, I might ask them. I generally take the mother hen sort of aspect when I'm in a group. I make sure anyone who's quiet, anyone who looks like they're not feeling as good as the rest of people, I will ask them if they're okay. You know, I'm the mother hen, the mother Henley. There's no Saturday haircut. Yes, I did. I'm trying to get it done. It's nice and short on the sides. I love it, but it's a lot of maintenance. You all good? Yep, done. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I suppose some people are like saying you're all good, and then like, you know, are you angry? Are you okay? Like, no, I'm all right. I'm just listening. And then they get a bit weird about it, and then like, have I done something to upset you? I don't know if that's generally just a neurotypical thing. I think that's just seeking reassurance, maybe. I mean, it depends on the person, doesn't it? Some people just call people out for stuff because they don't have as much of a filter. I don't know. We can theory craft all day, can't we? Nice shirt, thank you very much. You're getting a lot of compliments. Stop it.
Yeah. Led to a miscommunication about what was actually happening. Whose fault was it? It's a perfect example of how miscommunication doesn't just come from the autistic side, it is mutual. And sometimes neurotypical expectations are the thing that creates the misunderstanding. Empathy breakdowns then can happen from both sides, and it's not the fault of one side or the other. Any breakdown in empathic understanding is mutual and tends to happen across ND, NT boundaries are not within the same neurotypes, like a group of autistic people together. On my Scratching Post Discord server, there are over 100 autistic people empathizing and supporting each other with no such empathy difficulties in sight. Some autistic individuals...
Well, I think that's interesting because, I mean, with texting, with messaging, unless you use like, you do, I mean, even if you do use emojis, you are, to a certain degree, explaining emotions, you know? You're not expressing emotions, you're not in all one big room, sort of, you know, and so people can interpret the ways that you're saying stuff or your face, and you generally, if you want to get across that you are feeling a certain way, you need to be direct, I guess, sometimes. Some people can be indirect on text messages. You never know. Yeah, it's kind of removing that emotional expression aspect of it, I guess, to a certain degree. Cassandra syndrome is not the fault of autism. No, it is not, of course. You gotta look at it. If you're looking at it from like a basic sort of psychological or dating website, just take into account that is coming from a holistic perspective. Cassandra syndrome, IMO, is a universal phenomenon. Yeah, phenomena. Phenom. Yeah.
Experience hyperempathy, where they feel the emotions of others too intensely, leading to overwhelm and burnout.
Yeah.
This can sometimes result in avoidance behaviours or emotional shutdowns, which might be misinterpreted as a lack of empathy, when in fact it's a form of self-protection. I'm struggling to explain this, but like, it's not just that you feel someone's sadness, you feel it so strongly that it can physically drain you, like somebody's plugged into your emotional battery and they're siphoning out all your energy.
I think if we take this again to a sort of a different example. I think that there is a big difference in perhaps how we may process confrontation, arguments. I find that I really struggle if people are shouting at me or expressing a negative emotion which is directed towards me. That can be something which can be very overwhelming for sure. And in a lot of situations like that, if I'm getting too much of that shoutingness, too much of the sort of emotion, like negative emotional expression, sometimes, like, I will talk to people about things that, you know, that maybe not so happy with me about or something of that nature. But I will, if it is very strongly expressed, I need to get myself out to process, you know, especially if I don't feel able to speak, you know, if people are just like really shouting. I need some time. I need to avoid them for a while so I can process, so I can sort of regulate and be calm, and then approach it later. So I think that's something that we might sort of edge towards, that kind of behavior, which may come across as being dismissive. Possibility there. I think a lot of people can be like that anyway, for sure. But I don't know what you guys think. So it's good to check in about someone's perception rather than assuming what they're feeling. Yes. Yeah. Fortunately, some people don't like to be asked though. No, and some people lie, and some people will say that they're okay in a very passive-aggressive manner, which definitely informs you that they're not okay, and it's very difficult to reach any kind of reconciliation. I can't make sense of what's being said when someone is shouting with anger. No, exactly. I'm just like, yo, your energy, bro. It's too intense. I'm gonna go take a chill pill outside. I'll cash you outside. How about that? I use emojis, well, mostly to give text a little colour, but also to give away some feelings. Yes, they're emotional indicators, aren't they? I mean, does anybody use those emotional indicators? Not emotional. What they call context indicators. You put like a /JK to make sure, or /SAR for sarcasm. Lol. How are you? I'm fine. Oh, that's good. Yeah, I relate to that. That's the whole you know, we like definitive direct communication. And so when I was younger, I used to ignore all the ways that people said stuff or the ways that people looked if they told me something directly, and I would just ignore the rest of it. I'd just take the words for what they were, and it wasn't really a good way of conducting myself because a lot of the time I was wrong, and it would just frustrate the other person even more. And, you know, That was when I was a bit younger though, but tone tags, tone indicators, there you go. Sure. Those can be useful.
Sometimes fiction can do this to me. I know it's a story written for entertainment, but occasionally I can feel utterly drained, especially if it includes themes about animals being hurt. Some shows I won't watch because I know this in advance. Okja is one I'm going to avoid until I'm fully charged. Another concept that might help clarify is called monotropism. This is a theory of autism that suggests that autistic individuals have often one single sort of deep focus on certain subjects or interests at a time. You're deep in focus. You've got it's how autistic people allocate their attention differently and focus deeply on something. Now, while this deep focus can make someone seem disconnected from the surroundings or social cues, it doesn't mean that they're emotionless or without empathy. They might just be simply deep in focus. Now, I struggle to ensure that I drink and stay hydrated throughout the day, especially when I'm working and the hours just fly by. That's completely unnoticed by me, the passage of time.
Yes.
And my own bodily signals. And if I'm not picking up on those, then I'm going to struggle to pick up on the emotions of someone else vying for my attention. The first video on my channel was about monotropism for some very good and personal reasons. When we talk about autism, the language we use has a profound impact on how people with autism are viewed and treated by society. The words we choose shape how others see us, and they can either help to foster understanding and inclusion, or they can reinforce harmful stereotypes. And that's why it's so important to push back against outdated and ableist language that spreads the false idea that autistic people are cold, unfeeling, or lacking in empathy. Take Joe Rogan's comment about autistic people being automaton-like, for example.
Yeah. I mean, if he was just like an automaton, like some, sociopathic, just super Alzheimer's guy. Or,
super Alzheimer's.
Autism guy.
It paints a picture that's not only inaccurate, but kind of harmful.
Yeah.
This language isn't just a harmless mistake, it actively perpetuates ableism. Ableism, in case you aren't familiar with the term, is discrimination or prejudice against people with disabilities, including autistic people. When we use terms that frame autism as a lack, like saying someone lacks empathy or has a deficit in social skills, we contribute to the idea that autistic people are broken versions of neurotypical people.
Yes.
But we're not broken. We experience and express empathy differently, and the challenges come from society's inability to recognize and accept those differences. Autistic people are often incredibly empathic. In fact, many of us work in fields where empathy is key. Social justice, caregiving, the arts, and advocacy. I mean, I couldn't do this YouTube channel without even a drop of...
I mean, a lot of people who are autism advocates, you could say it is born out of empathy, but for some people, it is born out of hate. Like, some people, they really just don't like people who aren't neurodivergent or holistic, and they're just like, oh, I suppose someone else can be like I think a lot of autism advocates are not necessarily advocates for general autism, I guess, and more just advocates for themselves. I've seen quite a push for that in spaces that I've been a part of. I'm hoping that that's as a result of the stuff that I've put out, but a lot of people are switching from being autism advocates to being self-advocates because, it's just such a controversial thing to talk about autism generally. It's a star-studded show here. Thank you, Condor. You're an autistic tart? What do you mean? Oh, no, it's good to have you guys in here. Hello, Stephanie. Cool.
Drop of empathy. Come on now. There are roles that require deep care and concern for the well-being of others.
Yeah.
So when you suggest that autistic people are incapable of understanding or caring about the perspective of others, you're not just wrong, you're dismissing the valuable contributions that autistic people make every single day. When you constantly see characters on TV or film that are brilliant, but emotionally disconnected, it sends the message that autistic people can't be both intelligent and empathic. And that's simply not true. Many autistic individuals are deeply empathic, but they might express it in ways that might not fit.
Yeah, it's not one or the other. It's not like a this or that scale. On the one hand, you have intelligent. On the other hand, you have empathic. Oh, you mean that's interesting. Autistic tart meaning socially promiscuous. I see. I've never come across that. Oh, I'm going to use that. I'm going to steal it.
Fit the neurotypical mold. And that doesn't make their empathy any less real. Come to think of it, Autistic love languages sometimes differ from neurotypical ones. If I should make a video about it, let me know in the comment section below. I actually kind of need an excuse to talk about autistic pebbling. Changing the language we use when talking about autism is more than just semantics. It's about shaping a more inclusive and accurate understanding of autistic people. Instead of saying that person lacks empathy, let's talk about different expressions of empathy. Instead of deficits in social communication, let's recognize different ways of connecting. By using language that affirms autistic people's strengths and acknowledges the unique ways they have of experiencing the world, we can shift perceptions and create a society where autistic people are understood and valued, not for how well they fit into a neurotypical expectation, but for who they truly are. The truth is, autistic people feel deeply. The ways we express that feeling might differ from neurotypical expectations, but it doesn't mean it's not there.
Not all. That is for sure. It's not. I think what Mike's saying is that it's not like lacking empathy and autism is not correlated. Lacking adaptive empathy is not correlated with autism. But you can get people who are autistic and generally don't have empathy to people. I'm wondering, like, can someone be diagnosed with both autism and psychopathy? Is that a thing? Be very interested to. It might be a rabbit hole for tonight for me to go into.
Words matter, and they can either build up or break down understanding. If you've ever felt like you were taking on someone else's emotions so deeply that you needed to shut down, you're not alone. It doesn't mean that you didn't care. Watch this video next. It's about how some of us protect ourselves from absorbing these feelings.
No, I will not. PDA alert. Meow, meow. Don't tell me what to do, Mike. Oh my god. We had a little conversation about that, the pathological demantoids. Oh my god. Wait, what is this new chapter? Emotional support peacock. I have no idea. I've disabled the timeline at the bottom, so I don't know how long we are through this.
Bye.
Oh, the emotional support. Look at him. Emotional support peacock. I love it. It's great. Oh, brilliant video. Thank you very much. Autistic AF. Go check out their channel and give their video a like if you have liked it. It is a very new video, so I'm expecting that it's going to do very, very well. As with many of Mike's videos. I can't say phenomenon. I just say it like that, and that's not the way you're supposed to say it, is it? It's from the Muppets, isn't it? Phenomenon.